let's turn our attention to Dan Houston. And I suppose what is part of it is the prize pick race here. Pick 13 is big time on the table here, Zito. I know you love a pick race. Pick 13, the race for Dan Houston, and I think subsequently pick 13 is on. Collingwood, Carlton and North Melbourne all vying for the services of this dual All-Australian player. He almost feels like he's the player of the trade period at the moment. So, Joey, a question for you. He's contracted until 2027, Dan Houston. He's requested a trade, but he hasn't nominated a club yet. It's a bit unusual, I think, for a player to particularly go to Victoria and not nominate a club. Has he kind of left himself open a little bit here for Port Adelaide to do their work and find the club that gets them the best deal?
Yeah, he has, and that's good. I think we like that. What also I think gets undersold this time of year is what the player managers, the role the player managers have. They are the ones that try and orchestrate a lot of the trades. So he will still have his preference of which team he wants to go to. And let's say in order, it's Collingwood 1, Carlton 2. If we can't satisfy Port Adelaide, it's North Melbourne 3. And he's happy to play for those clubs. But the manager plays a big role in still getting the preference the way that Dan Houston wants it to pan out.
And Melbourne was on that list too until...
Initially, they were number one.
And we again asked Tim Lamb today and he said, well, yeah, I don't know if it played a role, but what's going on at that club, but we obviously want to become an attractive club again. So the fact that it's having that impact and rolling onto list management calls and people deciding whether to come to your club in such a line ball industry, that's another concern for them. But Dan Houston, I mean, Port has the whip hand here.
Is it weird that Melbourne is off the list but North Melbourne isn't? That speaks to a big problem with the Ds. If North Melbourne, who's been at the bottom for 5 years now plus, is still on the list. But they do have maybe the best offer to actually get to Adelaide.
Yeah.
With the
easily at the moment.
Yeah, a couple of first rounders is what's been reported from North Melbourne's perspective. But I think Port Adelaide might have to come back to the pack from that perspective. It feels like, Joey, that Collingwood is best placed here. Joe Richards requesting a trade to Port Adelaide has helped that. Gold Coast willing to deal with Collingwood with the John Noble wider discussion as well. Do you expect him to be at Collingwood next year?
It does feel like just the boys at Trading Day saying that he's now the favourite. So, but really Collingwood, the big risk for them is they can get pick 13, but they have to give up their future one to be able to do that as part of the John Noble trade from Gold Coast. So it's John Noble and their future one to get 13 and something else to satisfy Port Adelaide. Look, I'm a risk taker. I think when you're in the window, you've got to have a crack. So I'm all for it for Collingwood. It's only a small window with 9 players over the age of 32 on their list. It's a small time frame, but when you're there, you might as well have a crack. But again, if that happens, no first round pick this year, no first round pick next year.
How risky is that?
It is risky because they only have a handful of players under the age of 24 that have got high-end talent. Their list profile is going to skew south really quickly if they can't jag another premiership in the next couple of years while they've still got the older players. But sometimes when you're there, it's a risk worth taking. It could backfire, but it could also net them another premiership.
Well, Chris Davies has said today to the media that we're hoping that given the amount of interest in Dan Houston, they're just going to start working themselves into a frenzy about trying to give up more and more the longer this trade period goes. We now have some clubs cave. The closer it gets, you just get willing to give that little bit more to get the player you want. Are you surprised that Carlton has been so unwilling to come to the table in a big way for Dan Houston at this stage?
Yeah, I am.
Given what they've got on the line next year?
Yep, yeah, I am. I think that I'd be offering up pick 12 and something else to get Dan Houston. Again, they are a team that should be in the window. They are around the mark. They're close. So they should know of all teams how hard it is to actually get yourself with a list profile to be a contender. That when you are a contender, the margins are so small, you've got to try and do everything you can. They're still going to get the Camporelli boys, so it's not like they're not getting any young kids in.
Yep.
You know, one of them's got a lot more talent. You'd know
Ben
more than Ben.
Camporelli.
Ben's got more talent and potentially can play some footy. So I think it's a risk that they need to consider taking. But again, if they want to hold on to pick 12, how keen are they really on Dan Houston? They're saying they're keen, but they're showing that they're not really if they're not prepared to part with that. It's still a number. Pick 12, you know we should do it with history with trade picks. Everyone talks about the number. Go and actually have a look at the name attached to it. And very rarely does that name become a dual All-Australian like Dan Houston is. Yeah. So I'm surprised that Carlton aren't going harder.
We love nothing more in football than the Carlton-Collingwood rivalry, and it could spill over to trade period. What have you got for us, Scotty?
Well, Dan Houston, as we know, Collingwood have leapt ahead of Carlton. So Collingwood pick 13 from the Gold Coast. Ralphie, explain how they're going to get their hands on this, or they need to get this deal done.
So as we speak on Monday night, I think Dan Houston wants to play for Collingwood, and I think he's very likely to get there. So Collingwood's gone from out of the picture to the favourites. So the key is the Suns' determination to trade pick 13 with Collingwood because they want a John Noble. So The Pies' first offer was saying, we'll give up Noble and our future first rounder, and then we'll get back 13, 23 and 29 from Gold Coast. Now, Gold Coast are laughing at that, but they could give back 13 and 23, and then what Collingwood would do is to say we have 13, 23 and Joe Richards, who today requested a trade to Port Adelaide, and that would almost get it done for Dan Houston. Now, Carlton's wavering. That might well be enough. We know North Melbourne is hovering themselves with a future first rounder. Not sure he'd love to go to North Melbourne, but you almost think that 13, 23 and Joe Richards for Houston is enough for another Collingwood player to arrive.
Well, they want 2 first, don't they, Port Adelaide? And that is the game at 23 and you get Joe Richards thrown in. It might be enough. There'll be some haggling somewhere. They always do some swaps down the back end. But I like the aggression from Collingwood. I like them taking risks. I think it's so hard to get yourself into the premiership window that when you are there, you might as well go all in. Now, their window is small with the age group, the age demographic of their list. But I think it's a punt worth taking.
Well, the coach has made it clear he likes players. He loves players. He's tried to backtrack off that quote the other week, but he wants experienced players in. He's got Perryman. If you can get this, that's a great get.
They are mortgaging their future picks, though. It's going to be another future first rounder they're giving away, you're saying, as part of that. You look at the age demographic, that's 9 players that are going to be 32 or older next year. I know that still their stars are probably still in the sweet spot when you think of De Goey and Maynard and Moore and Dacos and these guys, but the window is closing. I'm okay. It's a risk. It could backfire, and we've seen it backfire with other teams, but they're going to have a crack.
Yeah, and the only thing that I would say is that they're very keen for a key back and they're very keen for a key forward, as Craig McRae said after the round 24 clash. It doesn't actually solve any of their issues there. So you give away that future first rounder. They did it. They could have had Finn McRae when they gave up the future first rounder for those points for Nick Dacos. It looked like it was going to backfire with Lachie Schultz this year, and then they improved their position. So you give up a future first rounder, you never know what you'll get back.
Joey, is that the last roll of the dice for all of those veterans? I remember us discussing mid-year on Fox Footy going, well, they can't all go on. They couldn't possibly all go on, but this has to be it, doesn't it?
At some point, it's going to run out, isn't it? But they're going to have another crack with them, and some of them in great form. Sidebottom came 5th in their BNF. Will Hoskin-Elliott had one of his best years. We know Elliott and Mychek, and these guys have still got good footy left in him, and Pendles can go forever.
So you can go dual narrative, though. So I understand that. All those blokes play on. Who's their best players under 25? Nick Dacos,
There's
then
very few.
Who, Joe?
Bobby Hill and McCreery. They're very thin under the age of 24, so they need to win another one if they are in the next 2 years and have a crack. It might backfire, but I like the punt.
What about Carlton? Pick 12 is there. They can get Houston right now with that pick, gazump Collingwood. All they keep talking, Nick Austin, their list manager, keeps talking about how much we love this draft. We love this draft. Does Michael Voss love this draft, or does he love Dan Houston playing on the halfback flank, All-Australian, 2-time All-Australian? They're a contender. They're in the window right now. Joey, why aren't they going, we want him, we're going to give you 12?
Yeah, they keep saying they want Houston, but they're not prepared to give up pick 12. So they're not really that keen on Dan Houston if they're not prepared to do that. Again, as I just said with Collingwood, I think Carlton are in a position where they have got themselves in the window. They need to continue to add more talent. I would be taking the risk. They're going to get the Camperelli boys in anyway, so they are still going to get some young players to even it out and find a bit more balance. I would be aggressive. I know it is a super draft, but pick 12 is still just a number. There is no guarantees you're going to get a dual All-Australian with pick 12. He's still going to have 5 or 6 years left in him. I'd rather take the punt on the known commodity, the body of work that I've seen, rather than taking a punt on a number that you don't know who that player is going to end up being.
So Carlton is in love with this draft, and you know what? They've had a pick within 25 in the last 4 drafts. So they realise they're heading not to a list cliff, but at some stage that list gets pretty old. So Ollie Henry was I think it's pick 11 of a couple of years back. So that's their rationale. I'm not saying I agree with it.
Will they change their tune in a week? That's the question.
Well, maybe if Freo all of a sudden wants to trade back a future pick. Of course, Freo's got 10 and 11. There are still ways for Carlton to gate crash this party. All I'm saying is that Collingwood's in front.